Hey friends, it's me. I'm back for another video. So thank you for coming back and watching this video with me. I know I haven't put out a video in a while and I'm sorry about that, but I am back at it. I've been working on my TikTok and a bunch of other different platforms that I've been trying to get onto to get my YouTube started. But today I'm going to talk about the Girl Scout murders. If you are not subscribed to my page, please subscribe. I tell stories about true crime, creepy and disturbing things every week. So let's get into it. The story started about 40 years ago during the darkness of a thunderstorm. 3 Girl Scouts were brutally murdered at Camp Scott in Oklahoma. June 13th, 1977 marked one of the most terrible and shocking crimes in Oklahoma history, kicking off an investigation that would go on for decades, seeing as it is still unsolved. So the name of this camp is called Camp Scott. Anticipating 2 weeks of activities and fun, Lori Farmer, who was 8 years old, Michelle Geis, who was 9 years old, and Denise Milner, who was 10 years old, were heading to their Girl Scout camp near Locust Grove, which is northeast of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Located just 2 miles in the town of Mayes County, Camp Scott has been operated by the Girl Scouts since 1928. Generations of girls have gone there for annual 2-week getaways every summer. Michelle Hoffman never forgot her first time at Camp Scott when she was 9 years old. The first thing she recalled was that it was dark, quote unquote, there. And if you've ever been camping in a platform tent in the deep woods, it is a little intimidating, she said. However, during daylight, Camp Scott was a beautiful campground and a step away from the hustle and bustle of Tulsa. Hoffman loved it there. She hiked, swam, and slept in tents like all the other girls, coming back every year. On Sunday, June 12th, Hoffman arrived at the Tulsa Girl Scout headquarters. She remembered the parking lot was packed with excited little girls waiting to board their buses to the campsite. She recalls seeing Denise Miller, who was one of the only African American girls going on the trip, and she could tell she was nervous. Thinking she could provide some encouragement, Hoffman walked over to Denise and her mother, Betty Miller, and introduced herself. Denise was feeling homesick. Betty told Hoffman she wasn't wanting to go to the camp at all. "Why don't you come with me?" Hoffman offered. "We'll ride together." Denise reluctantly went along, and the girls boarded the bus. They sang camp songs all the way down to Cookie Trail. The stormy first night, so occupying 410 acres with a creek running through, Camp Scott was surrounded by densely wooded forests. Like, it wasn't just, like a hike trail or anything like this. I mean, it was camping. The units, all named after Native American tribes, consisted of several camper tents and a counselor's camper tent. The tent sat on wooden platforms and held 4 cots for sleeping, while all 4 canvas sides rolled up. Hoffman described arriving at Camp Scott as always a sort of stepping off. As you turned off Oklahoma 82 onto Cookie Trail, the road narrowed to the camp entrance, and as you turned onto the dirt road, a peaceful place and a place where children were safe until that night in 1977. That year, Hoffman had hoped to become a camp counselor, so she escorted Denise to her tent. It was Kiowa tent number 8, where Hoffman had stayed many times before as a younger scout. Carla Willite recalled meeting Denise and thinking she was a beautiful and radiant child. She was the only African American girl there and a first-time camper. And I remember thinking we would want to make sure she had a great first experience. Denise was introduced to her tent mates, Lori and Michelle, and though they didn't know each other, they seemed to bond very quickly. Hoffman came back later to say goodnight to the girls, but they were already sleeping, looking forward to the fun that would come the next day. However, that night there was an early evening thunderstorm, making it especially dark, and with the lightning and thunder, it was really loud that night. One girl, Amy Sullivan, recalled writing in her diary that evening by flashlight. "It was the darkest dark I have ever known," she said. Though enchanting, it was a little bit scary at the same time for her. "I couldn't tell if my eyes were open or shut." At 6 a.m. on Monday, camp counselor Carla Willite was on her way to take a shower down the trail when she saw the girls' bodies near the base of a tree about 100 yards from their tent. At first, she did not see Lori and Michelle because they were zipped inside of their sleeping bags. Denise was lying on top of her sleeping bag, though. She was deceased when the counselor saw her. Confused and horrified by what she had seen, she turned and ran for help and returned with the camp director and nurse. Only then did it sink in and later recall being filled with a terrible fear. Autopsies would reveal that Lori and Michelle were killed by blunt force trauma to the head. Denise had been beaten but also strangulated. All had been sexually assaulted. Investigators determined the attacks had taken place inside of the tent and the bodies were later moved outside of the tent next to the tree. Immediately, camp officials began sending the Girl Scouts home or on buses out of the camp where police were now investigating a triple murder. Sullivan recalled her parents had been in Dallas and her grandmother picked her up this afternoon. "A few minutes later at a stoplight, I remember looking at her very closely," Sullivan said, and asked her what happened. "Oh, honey," her grandmother said with tears in her eyes, "3 girls were killed at your camp last night." The word "killed" not registering, she responded, "Killed?" Sullivan wrote in her diary that evening, "I got home from camp and 3 girls were killed." Sullivan later said she crossed out the word "killed" and wrote "murdered." She said she didn't even know what that word meant until that day. This is when the manhunt started, looking for this man that assaulted and killed these 3 little girls. As news about the horrifying case spread across the country, police investigators combed through the woods, looking for clues, conducted hundreds of interviews, and followed up on dozens of leads. On June 23, 1977, police named a suspect. His name was Gene Hart, who was 33, a convicted burglar and rapist. He was a prison escapee and been on the run for 4 years after his second escape from Mays County Jail. A native of Locust Grove and a Cherokee Indian, he is now facing 3 first-degree murders. The district attorney announced that investigators found a nearby cave that contained items possibly stolen from the camp. Authorities claim this cave was connected to Hart, who was an expert woodsman and also had many family members living in the area, including his mother. The largest manhunt in Oklahoma history ever began that day. Finally, 10 months after the murders, on April 6, 1978, the manhunt ended. Acting on a tip, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation converged on a remote home in the Cookson Hills, 50 miles from the camp. There, in a rickety old shack, they found and arrested Hart. The capital murder trial of Hart forced Oklahomans to relive the gruesome nightmare all over again. The media parked outside the courthouse and provided frenzied coverage. Held in the 3rd floor courtroom, the trial was presided over Judge William Whistler. Leading the defense team was Garvin Isaacs, a public defender, but is now working in private practice. He had been recommended to the Hart family. When he first met Hart, he recalled the defendant saying, "I want you to know one thing, I did not kill those Girl Scouts." Those were the first words out of his mouth, and I believed him when I said that, his defendant said. A growing number of community members and supporters who believed Hart was not guilty. There was a huge a ton of people who believed that he was not guilty. And to raise money for his defense, a community called Hog Fry, it was a big dinner that they had, was organized, and supporters wore t-shirts that read "Stop the Mays County Railroad," signifying the community's belief that Hart was being scapegoated by the police. The Cherokee Tribal Council even donated $13,000 to the defense fund. 21 months after the murders, the trial finally began. So the state's case depended upon two types of evidence. The items found in the cave, which were less than 3 miles from the camp, and it included a pair of glasses, a roll of tape that matched the tape at the crime scene, and some pictures linked to Hart, who once worked in a photo lab at a prison. In addition, biological evidence, including semen and hair samples, were found on the girls. A footprint was also left in the mud after the thunderstorm the evening of the murders. And while DNA would not be introduced until about the mid 1980s, hair evidence had been discredited as a forensic technique. Police admitted they didn't have conclusive proof that Hart had committed the crime, but there was also no fingerprints or anything. So the defense used this to their advantage while he was on trial. The hair was inconclusive, and the footprint did not match the size of Hart's foot. The evidence found in the cave was not convincing beyond a reasonable doubt, and on March 20th, 1979, the jurors announced a stunning verdict: not guilty. Trying to console the families, the prosecution pointed out that Hart in no way was going to go free for this. He was still going to serve over 300 years for previous rape and burglary charges. So on June 4th, the mother of the African-American girl received stunning news. Hart was actually dead. He had collapsed after exercising and died of a probable heart attack in prison. And that was the end, or so they thought. But the police had no intention of pursuing the case any further and had no additional suspects or anybody else that they were interested in. They had completely focused on Hart and put all their eggs in one basket. In the back of everyone's mind, they still wondered, was the killer loose? Was Hart really the killer? Did they need to find the real killer? Did he walk free? In early April of 1977, when Hoffman was at Camp Scott during the Special Cadet Weekend, someone went into her campmates' tents when they were away. When they returned, they found the tent was in total disarray. Our bags had been scattered everywhere. All the stuff inside our bags, it was thrown all inside the around the campground, inside of the tents, everything. And whoever had broken into the tent had also emptied a box of donuts that Hoffman bought to camp. Inside, she found a note. The note said there were 4 or 5 pages from a tiny notebook. On the first 2 or 3 pages, written repeatedly, was the word kill. And the second message in the notes that were especially chilling said, "We're on a mission to kill 3 girls." Hoffman said she took the note to the camp director, and later several girls had actually confessed to writing the notes, just as, I don't know, a not funny joke, so they were thrown away. The original investigation found semen on a pillowcase near the girls' bodies, and in 1989, the FBI tested the sample. However, they were unable to rule out Hart because the tests were inconclusive. So police needed a DNA profile. They were hoping continued advancements would allow them to retest the semen to reveal a long-awaiting profile. So for over 40 years, she didn't return to her daughter's grave at all. She would walk over to the plot located next to her grave where her late husband was buried, but she could never go to her daughter's grave. She finally was able to work up the courage and go to it, and she said, I was finally able to do it, and I'm so glad that I did. Her daughter Crystal actually encouraged her to go to the cemetery. It was her first time visiting the grave since 1977. I'm going to end the story here because there are more updates coming on and stuff like that. But let me guys know what you think about this story in the comments. I think this story is incredibly sad, crazy, and insane, especially seeing that my little girl is a Girl Scout herself. It's very scary. But I will be back next week with a new video. Just let me know what you guys thought about this story in the comments. Give me a like, a thumbs up, and subscribe if you have not done so. I do a story every week on true crime, disturbing and creepy things, and I will see you next week, guys. I hope you all have a great night. Stay safe. Bye.